Once again, thanks for joining the Starlite webinar. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. We're going to wait, let everybody join here. While we're waiting, Darcel, can you let everybody know how the CEU process works?
Hello, I've put the directions in the chat, but if you have any questions, please contact me. I will post my email in the chat. After the completion of the webinar, you will get an email with the evaluation. Please complete the evaluation, submit, and a CE certificate will be emailed to you. If you have any problems, again, contact me via email, which I will put in the chat, and we will be more than glad to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Darcel, for the CEUs. And this is a 1.5 hour, 1.5 CEU credits. So look for that on your certificate. We have a lot of people joining us all over, not only Texas, but outside of Texas. So thank you for joining us today on this holiday week. Let me introduce Frank Valley, one of our business development managers. Frank, can you tell us a little bit more about Starlite and the services provided?
I sure can, and welcome everyone. And I'm glad to see so many people attending right now. We have 210 signed up and it keeps climbing. If you're not familiar with Starlite, we were the very first and are the oldest drug and alcohol treatment center in Texas. We've treated over 45,000 people in the last 63 years and counting. We provide all types of services at Starlite. We're close to San Antonio. A lot of people know where Fiesta, Texas is. So we're about 45 minutes in the beautiful hill country on a 55-acre ranch. It's kind of near Kerrville. We have an adolescent female program ages 13 to 17, and we also offer continuing high school credits for them while they're attending that facility on our campus. We also have our adult program in 18 on up, and we have all types of programs within that. We have all masters trauma responsive therapists, our doctors and addictionologists. We have a nurse practitioner who's a psychiatric nurse practitioner. We also have psychiatrists available and RNs on every shift. We offer within our adult program various types of programs, such as our LGBTQIA program. We also have, for those that want a more of a faith-based program, we have called the Journey. And we also offer mind, body, spirit. So we have yoga, meditation, acupuncture. We have ropes courses, zip lines. So all types of different treatment available at Starlite. We also are very proud of our Valor and Honor program for our military and first responders. We are a network with 49 insurances. We also accept some Medicaid, and also if you look on our website, you'll get all the information you need, or feel free to call me or call any of the business development team here if you need help with a referral, or call Starlite directly. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. We appreciate your help. And everybody, all the attendees, you're going to get a follow-up email tomorrow with the link for your evaluation and also information about Starlite. If you dialed in by phone, you may get an email that says you weren't on the call if you already registered, but don't worry. We have your information and you can still do your evaluation and get your certificate of completion. So let me turn it over to Bob Maxwell in Dallas.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to have you here. I got the honor and the privilege to introduce to you our CEO, Rachel Everett. She has been with Starlite now 2 years. January will be the beginning of her 3rd year. She's a seasoned behavioral executive with over 17 years experience in various behavioral healthcare settings, to include forensic, hospital, and residential levels of care. She prides herself on having the ability to balance quality patient care with strategic priorities, change management, and improving operational indicators. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and criminal justice and a master's in business administration. She hails from Michigan, and she is green and white, Michigan State grad. So without any further ado, I would like to turn this webinar over to our CEO, Rachel Everett. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Bob. I am green and white. He was asking earlier if I was blue and maize, and the answer is no. So sorry if anybody on the call is a blue and maize fan. I tell everyone that the only time that Michigan State and Michigan University get along is when we play Ohio State, because we both, well, it's our biggest rivalry. So I'm happy to be here today. Thank you all for joining. I see a bunch of people still coming in. This webinar is kind of perfect timing in regards to, you know, it is the holiday season, and we're running into Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's and everything in between. And so a lot of people are taking time off from work, which is fantastic. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how to do that so that you can achieve the reset that everyone needs. And so entitled today, taking breaks doesn't mean you're broken, and avoiding employee burnout. Going to talk a little bit about us as staff, as employees of an organization. Going to talk a little bit about what the organization can do for us to prevent us from burning out and leaving. So we're going to talk about, we're going to define it, and then we're going to talk about the phases, and then we're going to talk about action, because for me, it's all about action that I can do, that we can do, right, to make sure that we protect ourselves and we protect our employees. So the definition of burnout from the Mayo Clinic, and then we'll get into what the WHO says. So job burnout is a special type of work-related stress. It is a state of physical and emotional exhaustion that also involves a sense of reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity. And I think making sure that we keep in mind that job burnout is both physical and emotional. And then also the loss of the personal identity, which we'll talk about when we get into the phases of burnout. You are going to get a lot of information really, really quickly. This webinar, I joke, right? I tried to do this in an hour once. I had to jam it all in. And this could actually be a very long discussion. So at the end, if you could hold your questions to the end, and I will try to leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end to answer some of those. So according to the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, burnout is a syndrome that is conceptualized resulting from chronic workplace stress. And so that's important, is that it's chronic, and it's characterized by 3 dimensions, right? So feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, that was in our first definition as well. Increased mental distance, so checking out, not really being present, being distracted, things of that nature, feelings of negativism and cynicism. And that's a lot of, when we experience this, we see employees that are overly negative about their company. They're gossiping at the water cooler a lot, talking badly about how they don't want to be there, etc. And then reduced professional efficacy. Burnout is now classified in the International Classification of Diseases, so the ICD-11, as an occupational phenomenon. It is not classified as a medical condition. So it's very important that we directly correlate and tie burnout to occupation and not to a disease. And we'll talk about why that is here in a second. So it is some statistics. We have a study that was done and found that stress directly contributed to 120,000 deaths per year. And so this would be, you know, your high blood pressure, your heart attacks, your strokes, and stress at work can directly affect your physical well-being. 65% of office employees say that they're impacted by workplace stress. And 12% say that that has led to a leave of absence. And so I'm a statistics geek. I love math. I love statistics. I think that statistics are what we run off of. And so when they throw out percentages, I thought, well, what does that mean? And so I took how many people were in the workforce, and then I figured out what 12% of that was, which 18.6 million people are saying that they have had to take a leave of absence due to workplace stress. So that's a huge number. 25% of people view their job as the number one stressor in their life. That's 38.9 million people. And 29% of workers feel quite a bit stressed or extremely stressed at work, 45.1 million people. 80% of workers feel stress on the job. 50% say that they need help in learning how to manage their stress. That's what we're doing today. And 42% say that their coworkers need help. So if you add the 50% that are admitting that they need to learn how to manage their stress, and then you add in the 42% of the coworkers that they say need help, that's 92% of our workforce. 62% of people and their workday. If you ever go home and your neck hurts, and I know myself personally, I carry all of my stress in my neck and my upper shoulders. And so if you ever end the workday with neck pain, more than likely, unless you've been in the gym working out too hard, it has to do with stress. 29% of people have yelled at one of their coworkers because of workplace stress. And 14% have actually felt like they wanted to hit someone, but they didn't. And I can tell you that the 14% that didn't, there was probably a sliver of people that actually did. So I also wonder if there's anyone here who has staff that work for them to let this next statistic resonate for you for just a second. That burnout is directly related to half, that's 50% of all employee attrition. So 50% of turnover at a company is directly related to stress and burnout, and that employees are having to work more hours for little to no additional pay, and as a result, they're starting to look for new jobs, and that's according to the American Institute of Stress. So our reality, and so this just kind of caps it all off. The reality is job stress is costly, right? It has carried a price tag in the US industry of $300 billion. That's in accidents, absenteeism, loss of work, diminished productivity. And so that can be people that just haven't left, or it turned over and you're having to hire and do all of those things that also cost money, like recruiting and orientation and training. But then you also have those that have diminished productivity that are there, but they're not really, they're checked out. And so they're not working nearly as hard as what they did when they first started and they were super motivated. Direct medical, legal, and insurance costs, and then also workers' compensation awards. And so that leads me to, this is going to be our mantra throughout this whole presentation. And then when we get to the end, we're going to change it just a little bit. So success requires effort. Effort induces stress, and stress can lead to burnout. And so we're going to talk about how you can gauge where you're sitting right now. And there's a few assessments that we can take that we'll get to next time on the next slide. But asking yourself these questions, and some of this, don't get me wrong, some of this you can easily say, well, that's just life as an adult, right? Like, do you tire more easily? I've got kids. Anybody else have kids? If you've got kids, especially if they're young children, right? The answer to that is probably yes. I was thinking this morning on the way here, we will have all 5 of our kids in our house. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where am I going to get the energy, right, to do all of this over the holiday? But asking yourself the rest of the questions, such as, do people annoy you, just by telling you things like, you don't look so good lately, or asking you how you're feeling. If you're working harder and harder, or you feel you're working harder and harder, and at the end of the day, you're left sitting in your car driving home and thinking, what did I even do today? I felt like I was going 1,020%, but I don't feel like I accomplished anything. Are you more cynical and disenchanted? You know, when you get a new job and you come into that new job, you're super motivated. You want to change the world. You want to change, you feel like you're going to accomplish all of these pillars, and you're going to do it super quickly. And if you're now thinking, gosh, I hate that place, or I don't want to go to work, or anything like that, and you're becoming cynical, then this is one of the ways you know you're starting to get burned out. Are you forgetting appointments, deadlines, personal possessions? Are you forgetting your kid, right? Like when you're on your way home, I've done that before at a previous job where I got home and I looked in the back seat and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to go get my kids from the babysitter, and had to like turn around and go get them. And are you increasingly more irritable, more short-tempered, more disappointed in the people around you? And we'll talk about how that affects your personal and your professional life here in a second. If you're too busy to see your close friends and your family members, if you're talking to them less, and actually this one resonates with me well right now, and that is, you know, I haven't sent out my Christmas cards, and you know, that definitely is weighing on my mind. So do you feel disoriented when the activity of the day comes to a halt? And then are you having physical complaints and you can't feel joy and you're unable to make a joke about yourself? And then does sex feel like it's more trouble than it's worth? And you have very little to say to people. So if you're typically an extrovert and you talk to people all day long, and suddenly you find yourself being more reclusive, it's probably one of the signs. So what is enough when is enough enough? And so we use the acronym PEPSI. And so you're looking at progress, efficiency, perfection, satisfaction, and innovation. And in any of these areas, you can get to the point where you feel as if you're not advanced enough. You're not productive enough. You're not beautiful enough. You're not content. You're not novel enough. And so those doubts start to creep into your mind the further and further you get into burnout. So most people, and this includes myself, and I'm going to tell you a bunch of my personal story when we get into the stages of burnout. But most people don't realize or recognize that their burnout is approaching until it's too late and there's nothing else that you can do. So the stages of burnout. So the first stage of the burnout is the compulsion to prove yourself. And so during this stage, right, this is normally when you get a new job. And so I also want to be clear that you can move through these stages. They don't have to go in order. You can jump from stage 1 to stage 8, depending on the severity of the stressor. You can also be in multiple stages at the same time, and multiple stages can be lit up for you at the same time. The majority of progress and progression happens within the first 3 stages of burnout. So this is where you're the most productive, and also you're working to your most kind of adequate, right? And you're meeting your goals, you're hitting your deadlines. So the compulsion to prove oneself, this is when you first get your job, right? And so you're coming in, you have an excessive ambition with a desire to prove yourself, and you want and you desire to be perceived as a hero, right? So I'll talk about my own personal experience and my compulsion to prove myself. So I was with the same company for 13 and a half years. And then I left that company, did a de novo with another company, and then I came back to the same company, but at a different location. And I was running 2 companies at the same time, and they were both in dire straits. So I'm not going to name the company. However, both of the facilities, I was running an acute care psychiatric inpatient hospital, and I was also running a residential treatment center at the same time. And both of them were in shambles. And so here I was, right, coming back to a company that I had been at previously for 13 and a half years. And they knew I was a go-getter, right? They knew I was able to turn patient care around and make patient care something to be proud of. And so I walked in thinking, all right, I got to be the hero. And so I was pushing myself and pushing myself. And I had this compulsion that all of my numbers were going to hit, that, you know, our reviews were going to go up online. All of these things were going to happen. And so then what did I do is I started to work harder, which is the second stage of burnout. And so when you start to work harder, you start volunteering for everything. And so that's what I was doing. I was volunteering to be on all sorts of boards, and I was out in the community, and I was taking on projects and things that should have been spread across the whole team. I decided that if you want to do something right, you have to do it yourself. And as that started to happen, right, like I was getting things done, but I was in the office probably 80 hours a week. I would get to work, 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning. I was coming home at 10 o'clock at night with my computer, by the way. And then I was working on the weekends. And so I was taking on everything, wanting also to have this feeling of irreplaceability. And I think when we get through all the end of this, it's important to know that everyone is replaceable and to keep that in your mind. And so I thought that the feeling irreplaceable, it was the ultimate form of recognition, right? Like we couldn't have done this without her. And so I also was denying how overwhelmed I was feeling. I was just taking everything in and not thinking about my family, my home life, my anything, and I will get to that in a minute, but that all fell apart. So how do you know if you're starting to get into the phase where you're working harder? And so that's when you're feeling busy, but not productive. And if you have a sense of guilt that you don't take on extra work, right? So that was one of the things that I struggle with. I even struggle with that now, right? Is I'm always the person when something needs to get done and there's a tight timeline, give it to Rachel, and she'll get it done. She'll hit the mark, she'll hit the timeline. And so if you feel guilty when you have to say no, and we'll talk about how to say no later on, then that's a sense that you're starting to head towards the end phase of stage 2. In stage 3, you're starting to neglect your needs. And so the fire's lit, it's burning bright, you're compelled to prove yourself, you're working harder, time is low, so you start to dip into other areas of your life to make more time. If you used to go to the gym and you used to be very, 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 very religious about going to the gym every single day, and then you see that start to fall away. If you're normally very conscientious about your diet, and then all of a sudden you stop meal prepping because you need to be working, sleep, socializing, and self-care at the end of this stage starts to really take a back seat. And we tell ourselves, right, like when we're in this stage that the sacrifice is going to be worth it. Because we're going to have that heroic performance, and every single person is going to notice what we're doing, and we're going to move up, or we're going to, be publicly recognized for the fact that, we're not sleeping, but maybe 5 or 6 hours, and we're working all the time, and we're either losing or we're gaining weight, but it's all going to be worth it at the end. And so when you're looking at yourself and asking if you know how you're here, you're asking yourself, are you getting less than 8 hours of sleep to focus on work? Like that's the key. This is all about work and our job? Have you lost or gained weight due to the change in eating habits because you're always working and so you're neglecting the things that you used to do? And have your family and friends complained that you're always working? So stage 4, we're moving into displacement of conflict. And so disappointment, anger, general feelings of discomfort become to be a central part of your attitude. And for me, this was when I noticed that I was short-tempered with my husband. I was short-tempered with my kids. My mom would call and I kind of roll my eyes like, I don't really have time for this right now. Doesn't she know I'm busy? My workload took on high expectations and I was incapable, right? Like of finding out at this point what was causing my uncomfortable feelings. I thought it was everyone around me. I was really good at saying, oh, it's not my job, right? Like my job's where I have everything under control and it must be something someone else is doing, right? So that denial. And at this point, we are aware that something's not right. I knew that this irritable person that I had become and was not me. And the fact that I was snapping at people was not me, but they must have been doing something, right? It wasn't on myself. And so to deal with the root of our distress, we're just continuing in that denial. And sometimes at this stage, towards the end of the stage, physical symptoms emerge. And so I remember driving home. It was probably 9:30 at night. It had been a super stressful day in the inpatient. We had a whole bunch of scrutiny from CMS coming down the pipeline. I was trying to put together a whole bunch of documents to fix, right, like what was going on. And I'm driving home and I have this horrible headache and my chest is pounding. I was having a panic attack, right? So that's what was happening. But in my head, I'm like, no, right? Like I'm fine. I just must be, my blood pressure must be high, or maybe I ate too much salt today. And we'll talk about how that continued to happen until it was overwhelming. So how do you know if you're in displacement of conflict? So this is stage 4, is are you easily irritated on things that wouldn't usually irritate you before? And that's the key is, if my kids had left their socks on the floor before, I would have just picked them up, or I would have told them to come pick them up. And instead it was this big thing for me. Are you starting to procrastinate at work? So are you leaving things? Are you leaving things behind and saying, oh, well, I can do that later, or I'll do that when I get home, or I'll do that on the weekend. And then are you finding it hard to figure out what's actually irritating you? So in stage 5, we start to revise our values, which is super scary if you think about that. You're actually becoming in this stage emotionally detached from your own life. Only work matters. And you keep pushing yourself to set out to do something that's an increasingly difficult and impossible task. And that's where I, was really not paying attention to my house and really not paying attention to what I needed to do in any other area of my life other than work. And so I thought, right, like if I just keep going, eventually this will get better. And sometimes we have to come to the realization that there may be too much damage for us to handle in and of ourselves. And so you're starting to isolate, right? You're doing conflict avoidance at work, but maybe conflict engagement at home. And you have denial of physical needs. Your basic physical needs change also your perception, right? So now you're hardly sleeping. And for me, this looked like get up, drink something, right, with caffeine, whether it be a Monster or my favorite D.R.A.G.O.N, or coffee to get going. Check my email. Actually, I checked my email before I even got out of bed in the morning. And that is a problem that we'll talk about later on what we should and shouldn't do. So I'd wake up, I'd check my email, I'd get up, I'd get some caffeine, I'd go, I'd get in the shower, I'd get out, I'd check my email again, right? And now I'm looking at admissions and what I have to do and how many meetings do I have today and how am I going to put this all wrapped up, right, into this short period of time that I had that day to get everything done. How many deadlines did I have? How many documents did I need to push out? And physically, I was exhausted. So I revised my value system and said, oh, well, my hobbies, I'm an artist and I love to paint and I love to read and I love to make things. And so all of that went out the window. I didn't read anymore. And on a good week when I am doing my own self-care, right, I can read probably, I don't know, 2 to 3 books a week. And I wasn't reading at all. I didn't even have an art room in my house at my last company because I never had time to do any of that. And so I've revised all of my values. Those things were no longer important to me. Didn't go out with friends. And so how do you know if you're here? So have you started to avoid people? Have you stopped talking about your problems and emotions to people you would normally trust? Do causes and projects that once excited you, like if you enjoyed making a scarf or you enjoyed going fishing and bringing home your catch, right? If you enjoyed things like that and now they seem insignificant, you're probably in stage 5. And if something doesn't work out, do you blame yourself first before looking for reasons? And so now you're really starting to internalize, why am I not good enough? And why can't I get this done? Stage 6, so denial of emerging problems. You're pretty much in denial the first 6 stages. And so, but in this stage, exhaustion due to burnout has completely changed your behavior. But you're in full denial that you have changed at all. You're developing intolerance, perceiving your coworkers as stupid, lazy, demanding, or undisciplined. And so you're starting to think that no one else is good enough on your team, and that's the reason why you're in the situation that you're in. Cynicism and aggression become more apparent. So if you are prone already to having a hot temper, and I'll raise my hand on that one because I am prone to fight. I don't flight or freeze. And so not physical aggression. I'm talking more verbal, right? Where you just fly off the handle for no apparent reason. That's becoming more and more apparent, both in your work life and in your home life. And then being cynical about your job, about the amount of pressure that you have. And you view your increasing problems as caused by time pressure and the amount of work you have, not by the way you've changed. So how do you know if you're in stage 6? So are you finding that people whom you normally work well with, so if you normally have a project team that you work really well in, and all of a sudden you're finding them annoying, or small and trivial things during your work projects are causing you to lash out, you're probably in stage 6. And are you becoming increasingly impatient with mistakes and slow progress? So stage 7 is withdrawal. And so social life, small or non-existent, the need to feel relief from stress. So if alcohol and drugs are going to raise their ugly head, it's normally in stage 7, and then it progresses from there. You're using alcohol or drugs as a way to be able to isolate away, escape all the feelings that you're feeling of being overwhelmed. And you're beginning to look for a way to dull everything that you're experiencing. And so this could lead in stage number 7 to alcohol and and drug use. How do you know if you're here? So do you feel listless and aimless? Do you feel like you've lost sight of the goal or the purpose of what you're doing? Have you started to drink or use drugs as a form of escape? And are you not able to sit down and talk to someone anymore about how you're feeling? So in odd behavioral changes, which is stage 8, your family and friends are very concerned. Due to exhaustion and lack of focus, you might become jittery, feel threatened, take on a more introverted personality if that's not you. And the others in your immediate circle are no longer able to ignore what's happening. So now you're getting a lot of questions, right? Like, are you okay? What's going on? You're not the lively and engaged person that you once were, and you're now becoming kind of almost fearful, shy, and apathetic. Inwardly, you're starting to feel worthless. And this is where my most marked change happened is, I kept thinking, why couldn't I just strong arm this, right? Like, I was supposed to come in, I was supposed to be this savior, and obviously, right, I wasn't able to do it. And so the feeling of being worthless, I was in a shell at this point. I was kind of just a shell of myself, and started to be paranoid, right, that I was going to get fired, or that, and I even had a major break in a relationship with my best friend. So my best friend worked for the same company, and she was the corporate compliance officer, and she was the person who, was supposed to be on my team, right, to help fix all of these issues that we were having. But I felt that she was stabbing me in my back. She was talking about me to the other corporate officers, and that she didn't have my best interest in mind, all because this is where I was. And it wasn't until I was out of the woods that I could actually see the trees. And so she said things to me after this was all over, that I had become cold and uncaring, which is not, the person that I am. But we had a major break in our relationship while I was working for this company, and it took us a long time to fix it after it was over. Do you feel unappreciated for even the smallest of tasks? And so if so, then stage 8 may be where you're at. Depersonalization. So you're seeing neither yourself nor others as valuable. And you no longer perceive your own needs. Productivity is a practice that is meant to be liberating. Absolutely. So when you're productive, it is meant to hit those dopamine receptors in your brain and give you this feel-good feeling, right? That's what meeting a goal does. It hits those receptors and gives you the sense of, right, like I accomplished that. But if you're losing contact with yourself and you're no longer seeing others and yourself as valuable, that goes away, and your productivity no longer gives you those hits of dopamine and gives you the feel-good feeling that you're looking for. And instead, life becomes a series of mechanical functions. If you've ever taken economics in school and you've had a professor that talks like this, that's basically what you are at that point, a robot. Mechanical functions is your life. And by the way, this is one of the first symptoms of depression. And so if you are in this stage of burnout, so anything past stage from 9 until 12, I highly, highly encourage you to seek help to pull yourself back because you are in a negative free fall right now, hitting stage 9. And there is no amount, and I want you to hear me when I say that there is absolutely no amount of self-exertion that is going to solve the problem at this point. Working harder to break the cycle by being inventive is not the solution. You are losing right now. And you're losing yourself. So how do you know if you're here? You're increasingly disoriented. You're forgetting what people said to you. That was one of my clues, right? So people would say, Rachel, you told me this 3 days ago. And I would tell multiple people the same thing and forget who I had said it to and what I had said to them. Does it feel like your actions have become automated without any particular purpose? So you're kind of a robot, right? You're getting up, you're doing the thing, you're doing what you need to do, but that's where it stops and ends. There's nothing else there for you because that's what's happening. And have you stopped looking ahead and planning for the future? That's a huge key. And so stage 10, we're talking about inner emptiness. So we're feeling empty inside, and to overcome this, we're looking for activities such as overeating, sex, alcohol, drugs, and those activities in this stage are usually over-exaggerated. In this stage, it tends to precede full-blown depression, which is the next stage. And although you don't have to go through the stages in order, this is the natural stage to depression. The drug use and the drinking tends to become more of an extreme, and your inner emptiness expands relentlessly. Leisure time is dead. You've got none. And so how do you know if you're here? And so is getting up and out of bed a painful experience, right? And I'm talking not just emotional pain, but physical pain. Do you wake up and think, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've got to do this again today? Are you always thinking that there's no way out? And have you lost sight of the immediate future? Because if you've forgotten to plan for your kid's birthday, or you've forgotten to plan for the holidays, you're at this stage, and you've lost the war against burnout. And this is extremely important, and you need professional help because you're heading straight into depression, which is feeling lost, unsure, exhausted, and the future feels bleak and dark. Burnout depression is different from clinical depression, in which that burnout depression is temporary and it is focused on one area of your life other than being generalized. And the reason why it's temporary is because if all of a sudden the job is gone, the burnout is gone, and the depression more than likely subsides. And so this type of depression also is correlated to a strong sense of anger instead of being tied to guilt. And I think that's important for us to remember as well. You're angry that you haven't been able to hit all those markers. And the anger is from a place of frustration and finding yourself being burnt out and unproductive. And so you've become indifferent, hopeless, and exhausted, believing that nothing that the future holds is for you. Life has lost meaning. And so how are you here? Anger is a constant at this point. And the way you react to everything that goes wrong is negative. Are you having suicidal thoughts? Do you feel that everything you do is meaningless? And have you lost interest in the work that you were doing? And if you are in this place, the house is won. So if we're playing cards, the house is won, and you're done. You're burnt out, which is stage 12, which is the burnout syndrome. This is total mental, physical collapse, and it's time for medical attention. And so for me, I did make it all the way to 12, and I ended up having to go to the doctor, which was a blessing in disguise, let me just say, because I did find out that part of what was happening to me after I had gained 30 pounds, right? Because I was eating crap all day because I didn't have time to do anything else. I wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't taking care of myself. And, you know, found out that I do have rheumatoid arthritis. And so that all came full circle when I was at the doctor saying, something is wrong with me. You know, I'm having all of these symptoms of a panic disorder, even though, you know, 10 years ago, I did therapy and took care of that, right? They're all rearing their ugly head again, and I can't handle what's happening. And so you might have a nervous breakdown at this point. And this stage is the most dangerous. And almost all of the burnout victims in this stage have had suicidal thoughts to escape their situation, and a few actually carry them out. Ultimately, they suffer a mental and physical collapse. And are you here, right? So this is the other question. And thankfully for me, I lost my job because all of those things that I was worried about, I had a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So I did it to myself. And all of the extra load that I was carrying and all of the things that I did ended up being for nothing, right? Because I was replaceable and I had pushed myself beyond anything that any one person was capable of. And I just kept going. So if you're here, you may have had a blackout. You might be constantly ill. Your friends and your loved ones are angry with you. They might be leaving your side. So you might be starting to lose some of your primary support group at this point. And have you been fired, or are you on the verge of being fired? And so actually the most wonderful thing that resonated with me and brought me to this topic is I never wanted to do this again. Like this was absolutely the most terrible experience of my life. And I didn't even realize how much I had impacted my family until I was driving home one day. And this is about 5-6 days after everything finally came to its culmination. And my daughter said to me, "Mommy, I know you're sad, but I'm just so happy that I have my mom back." And I wasn't even sure who you were anymore. And that was probably the most powerful statement to come from a 13-year-old girl that I've ever had spoken to me. And so let's talk a little bit more about this, and then we're going to go into like, how can we fix it? Because that's the most important piece. Not that you get to this point or that you're starting to head to that point, but what can you do? What things can you put into place to be able to start to undo some of what is being done? And so there's types of burnout, right? So several different types, and you have to make sure that you're not falling into any of these types of burnout. So there's frenetic burnout, which is that you're working increasingly harder in order to get things done. Under challenged, right? So if you're going to work and the job is below your skill set, and so you're not being challenged at all to rise to an occasion at any point in time, you can burn out from that. Going to work and it just being methodical. And so worn out, this is when you have prolonged states of stress. And then fatigue, of course, right? When you're working 80 hours a week and you're tired. You can also have generosity. If you've ever been that person that everybody comes to when they need a favor, that can lead you into the burnout stages as well. Is, hey, I need a favor. Could you pick up this task? Hey, I need a favor. Could you pick up that task? And if you are that person, we'll talk about how to politely, professionally say, no, my plate is full. Brownout. So this is the Burnout's slower and more sinister cousin, and it's a deeper, obscured type of fatigue. It afflicts successful high performers, and over time, they lose their passion for work. And so if you're losing your passion for what you do, then you may be a brownout type of burnout. And so we've got residual, which is just, you've already burned out. You thought you fixed it. You removed yourself from the situation. This would have been me had I not done things differently. I would have been a residual burnout. Because if I would have just taken a new job and started to do things the same way that I'd done them before, I would have burned out again, but probably more quickly. Perfectionist, every single thing has to be perfect. Every dot has to be on the I, every comma has to be in the right place. And so you're constantly pushing yourself to unrealistic expectations, and you don't allow yourself to make a mistake. And then the Phoenix. So the Phoenix is a combination of perfectionist, worn out, and frenetic. And so if you're a combination, you might be a Phoenix. Excuse me. So if you want some tools, there's some tools with some links, and I will let Darcel and Bob and Frank and Eric send this webinar to you so that you can use the PowerPoints to take you to the link. So you can do an MBI, which is medical personnel, human services workers, educators, generals, or students, and then they have an inventory there for you to do a self scale on where you are. Holmes and Ray also has a stress scale that you can use. And then Copenhagen Burnout Inventory is also available, and all of these are available for free online. So how are we going to fix it? How are we going to fix and how are we going to prevent us from all of those horrible things that I talked about at the beginning? So for me, it was super important that I did something different, and I had to figure out what those things were going to be. And there's certain things that I'm going to talk about that work for me that might work for you. And there's certain things that don't work for me. I'm going to tell you about them anyway, because they might work for you. And so in order to start to prevent burnout, you're going to want to be a dragon. And you're going to want that dragon, you're going to have to roar like you're that dragon. And so the first part of being a dragon is actually the hardest. So when we talk about the D, which is deloading your priorities. And people say, everything's my priority, right? Everything has to be a priority. That's not true. So if you've ever heard of FOMO, so FOMO is the fear of missing out. I want you to embrace JOMO. I want you to embrace the joy of missing out. So if there is things that absolutely unequivocally are not necessary, but you feel like you have to be there because you might miss something. So like that coffee that your coworkers are inviting you to, that meeting that you were sent a request for, but you're optional, right? But you don't want other people to know things that you don't know. So you have a fear of missing out. And so you're accepting that meeting and you're going to do it anyway, even though it's going to smash into your schedule that you already have no room for anyway. So I'm asking you to embrace the joy of missing out. Embrace the JOMO. If you're an optional person on a meeting, don't go. If you are invited to a coffee and it's not necessary because they just want to chit chat about something that's unimportant, don't go. Embrace the joy of missing out. Sometimes, right, time and silence are the most luxurious things we have. And so take your time, guard your time from things that don't warrant your immediate attention or leave you feeling drained. Sometimes you just don't want to go to that coffee because you don't want to hear about Susan's problems with her kid for the 70th time, right? And so if you're dreading something and you don't need to be there, don't go. Go out on your own terms, not anyone else's. And take a look at your calendar, right? I encourage all of you to take a look at your calendar, assess the stressors that are in your calendar, and decide which of those are non-essential and which of those are essential. So also reducing reactivity. And so what this means is you get this request for a meeting and you're immediately like, yes, I got to do it. No, but do you? So you have to reduce your initial reaction, which is I can be all things to all people, and understand that you cannot. You need time to recoup your own energy because that is absolutely essential. And so you have to reduce your initial reactions to jump on it. Let me take it. Let me volunteer. If you're always the person that raises their hand, anytime somebody says, well, who can do this task? And you're like, me. I encourage you to reduce your reactivity to that. Look around, you have a team. If you have other people can pull part of the load and let them, and it's okay. That was one of my biggest struggles, and what I feel guilty about is I feel like having other people do some of the work inconveniences them, and I don't want to do that. And so also looking at your workload, condensing that workload down. If you can, right? I tell everybody here, my delete finger is strong. So if for some reason you expected to get an answer from me, it's very possible that as my delete finger was so strong in my email, I might have just accidentally, right, deleted that. But if it doesn't pertain to me, I don't read it, I delete it. Don't read things, don't pay attention to things, and don't participate in things that aren't within your hula. They're not in your scope. And so if you get an email, a random email, and for me, it's always, so-and-so's at the gate. Okay, delete, right? Like I don't need that information. It doesn't need to go into my mind. If you can defer it, defer it. If you can delegate it, do that. And if you can diminish it, which means you can make it smaller and you can make it your timelines, right? If you can simplify them, do it. It will make your life so much easier. And so the very first thing to look at is your priorities and deloading some of them. Reconfigure your focus. And so looking at fixing your compass. And so if you're a person that tries to wear all the hats, but you have a job, wear your job hat and let go of the other hat. Stop trying to be all things to all people. And that's what I mean by fixing your compass, which is the R in our dragon. We're going to reconfigure our focus, and our focus needs to come back in and get a little bit tighter to what our actual job is. And so I also encourage you to audit your time expenditure. And I'm going to talk about these two in conjunction, time and energy. So if you've ever decided that you wanted to become debt-free, or if you ever decided that you needed to put yourself on a budget, which I think we all have, right? So what do? Well, we make columns, right? So we write down all of our bills. Then in the next column, we write down how much they cost, right? And then we end up with how much time we have left or how much money we have left. And then we start thinking about, oh, well, I do get a latte from Starbucks every day. Well, that's $5 a day, right? So then 5 times 5 is 25 times 4, right, is 100. So now, I've got to put $100. Well, so if you're trying to save money and you're trying to pay things off, or you're trying to buy a new car, you're saving for a house, some things have to be cut. And so your Starbucks 5 times a week for $5 a day might be one of those things that you're going to have to scale back on. So I highly encourage you to sit down and do the same thing with your time and do the same thing with your energy. So do an audit. look at what are all my tasks that I do, how much time do all of them take, and then look for the fluff. Look for the things that you can get rid of. Look for the things that you can budget out of your life, right? And then focus on those things. And then I want you to take a hypothetical, right? So imagine you can do whatever you want for a whole week. That's 168 hours. I want you to craft your ideal 168 hours. Yes, work still has to be in there. However, work should not be 80 hours of your 168. And so craft your ideal 168 hours. And then I want you to compare your ideal 168 hours to your time and your energy expenditure to see how far off you are. And if you're a long way off, I highly encourage you to start to move your time expenditure to look like your ideal 168 hours. Whether that be you're going to start making time absolutely unequivocally to go to the gym 1 hour a day. If that's in your ideal 168 hours, in mine, I would be like a model and I wouldn't need to go to the gym, but in reality, right, like I do have to do that. So it would be in my ideal 168 hours that I make time for physical fitness, right? So, and start to move your actual time into your ideal 168 hours. Now, this is a hard one. So A is assembling boundaries. And so people talk about boundaries all the time. You have to have ethical boundaries. You have to have clinical boundaries. You have to have cultural boundaries. You have to have, right, boundaries. But this is talking about knowing when to say no. And this is really hard to do. And so if your plate is full, and someone asks you to take on something outside of what your job is, you have to know when to say no. So at the beginning, when you're proving yourself, right, and you're coming into a new organization, probably not the time to say no. You're learning your job anyway, right? You probably have some additional time because nobody's packed your schedule full of 800 meetings because, well, they don't know you're there yet. But once you're there for a while and you're already settled in and you're an active, productive member of the team, if your plate is full, you have to know when to say no. And the art of the perfect no is very difficult, right? So if your boss is coming and saying, I need you to do blah, 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 but it's outside your scope, what you could say is, well, my plate's really full. However, I know that Susan, and this is within her scope, has some extra time available. Could you perhaps ask her, right? So you're giving them an option. You're not telling them no, because that would be insubordinate, right? But you're giving them an option of someone else, and you're helping them problem solve the situation. So you have to perfect the art of saying no and making sure that you're protecting your time. You also have to create some non-negotiables. I have one non-negotiable, and I actually kept my non-negotiable even when I was going through all 12 of the stages of burnout. However, I was late more often than not. My non-negotiable is I am at every single one of my son's football games and every single one of my daughter's cheer competitions. That is non-negotiable for me. I really, honestly, truly, like, things would have to be on fire. And I would be having to be, I don't know, somebody would have to tie me down. So you need your own non-negotiable, whether that is, I am going to take a 30-minute walk every single day at lunch to take a break without any interference or any distraction, whether it's you're going to go to the gym 1 hour a day, whether it's you're going to turn your phone off for half an hour every day, an hour every day. You are not going to check your email when you first wake up in the morning. You need to set a set of non-negotiables for you that are going to work for you. And so that when it is time for you to do your non-negotiable, that's it. It's the end. You also have to know when to stop working. And this was part of my problem, right? Where I was working and working and working and feeling like I was going absolutely nowhere, which I was. And so you have to know when it's time to fold up for the day. And so my key phrase is I'm packing my toys and I'm going home, right? Like, so if I hit a point where, you know, I can't come up with a phrase after thinking about it for 3 or 4 minutes and it's 5:30 at night, like I'm done. I'm packing up my toys. I'm going home. I could sit here until 6, 7 o'clock at night, but what good is that doing? Because I'm not being productive anyway. And so when you've hit the wall, you need to know your own self and your own body and when you're going to hit that wall. And when you hit that wall, it's time to stop working and you've got to go. The G's, so we're going to gain mastery of our stress. And so looking to separate eustress from distress. And so eustress can be a positive type of stress and distress is a negative type of stress. Positive stress is like getting married, buying a house, having a baby. Those create stress, but they're a positive type of stress. Distress is getting evicted, feeling like you're going to get fired, not being able to accomplish a deadline in time. Those are all distressed. And so separate the two of them and understand that there is stress that comes from both. However, the way that you deal with the stress can look very different. Take breaks or be broken. And so taking breaks should be built into your workday. And there's different types of breaks, right? So every 20 to 25 minutes, you should take a micro break, which is just a small 20 to 30 second, right? Get up, stress, move around, stretch, and, you know, make sure that you're still there and engaged and focused. And so you should also take a short rest break every 60 to 90 minutes to get up and actually walk away from your desk. Go talk to a coworker, go, you know, walk outside. And every 60 to 90 minutes, you should take about a 5-minute break just to get yourself centered again, right? A lunch break, 30 minutes. Guys, this is without work. It's without work. And I'm prone to this as well. I'm very, very prone at eating at my desk. And I have to tell you that I find that I function much better at work when I actually get up, go down, and I eat in the cafe. And I stay away from my desk, away from my computer. I even leave my phone sometimes, away from my phone, right? And I take 30 minutes to just stop. Should be eating, not working. And so then also your evenings and your days off should be time to replenish and optimize your resources and to detach as much as possible, right? So I'm not going to say that this is easy for me. As the CEO of Starlite, I'm on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, right? But I can tell you what I've had to do is I don't check my email every 5 seconds. I've come to the realization that if they truly need me, they're going to call me. And so that allows me to detach and replenish. I sit at home in the evenings, particularly on the weekends, and I paint, I read, I take care of my kids, I cook dinner, you know, wrestle with the 2 little dogs. And so that is the time where you're detaching as much as possible and you're optimizing, replenishing yourself and your energy. Vacations are a big reset. And so I love to cruise because going on a cruise, no one can get a hold of me on my phone or via email. And so those were always my big reset until COVID. And so vacation should be a big reset. No work, right? And if you keep working, you're never going to get a chance to reset to zero. And also please know that interruptions are not breaks and you should avoid them with extreme prejudice. They slow down your productivity. And it's also not a break if you don't take it. And so apparently I want to skip ahead, but so balance optimism with realism, right? So it's easy to get in this where everything's going to be great, everything's going to be fine. But we do live in reality, and sometimes things are not fine, and some days are more stressful than others, right? And so I think COVID-19 has stressed all of us. We're all dealing with things that are different that we've never had to deal with before. And so you have to really balance yourself. And then I always do much better when I anticipate things. And so if I can anticipate a stressor, if I can anticipate, a project, or if I can anticipate the fact that, right now, actually we're getting pumped up to open another intensive outpatient clinic, I can anticipate that stress. I know what that stress is going to feel like. And so therefore I can make sure that I have enough safeguards in place to handle the stress. So if if you're a clinician and you know that you've got 4 groups in one day, you can anticipate the stress of all of those notes that you're going to have to write when those groups are over. And then you can mitigate that stress easier. Overcome overachievement. I had to do this myself moving into this next position. And so do fewer things and do them really well, right? So we oftentimes try to be all things to all people. There's certain things that I will tell you right off the bat, I am not. So for instance, IT, I am not an IT person. I can look at you and I can say to you, my computer is being bad. Well, what does that mean, Rachel? Well, it won't print. Well, what happened? I have no idea, right? Well, there are things that I do not do well. There are things that I do really well. Crunching numbers, looking at clinical programming, working in what's in the best interest of our patients. Those things I do really well. And so narrow your focus and prioritize your momentum over your goals. There's a statement that says that a dream without a goal remains just a dream. So you need to have momentum, which, for the clinicians on, is your objective to get to your goal. Those are your momentum, right? So you need to have an end goal, because you can shoot for something all day long. If you have no goal, you will feel like you have not been productive at all. But if you have small momentum goals to reach your final goal, right, you're going to feel as if you're gaining some ground. And then double down on your strengths. If you do something really well, double down, make sure that others know that you're really, really good. We have a couple people here that are fantastic at re-engagement. When someone's trying to put in a 4-hour notice and leave treatment early, we have several people here. They are like my go-to. That is their strength, going and giving people some real and honest truth. And I pull on them every time, and they double down on that strength. And then nurture resilience. And so you're looking at incrementally stepping outside your comfort zone. If you're saying, I can't public speak, I don't like to public speak, I don't like to do webinars, perhaps stepping incrementally outside your comfort zone is going to give you a win, right? So if you do it for 3 minutes, or if you do it for 5 minutes, or if you just introduce someone, that gives you progress, and it starts to nurture your resilience to being able to overcome stress, right? Small steps, baby steps. Practice non-zero days. And that is a day, I don't know if you've ever had a day where you've said, I am going to do absolutely nothing today. That's bad. Don't do that. You should do one thing to meet one goal, even if it's just, I'm going to get up and get dressed and brush my teeth. That you met your objective for the day. A non-zero day, you would have stayed in bed and you wouldn't have gotten dressed and you wouldn't have brushed your teeth. So practice non-zero days. Make self-compassion a habit. So you're making sure that you understand that you're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes. Things are going to go wrong. And you should be compassionate towards yourself. It's really easy to do it towards other people, but towards yourself, it's a lot more difficult. And then make meaning of your experience and cultivate your own self-awareness. Know when you're getting to the point where you're burning out and need to take a step back. So employer responsibilities, what can we do, right? When we're looking at our employees and if they're burning out and how to prevent that. So I think we have a responsibility to be realistic when we're assigning tasks. If we're noticing that one person that is always raising their hand and is taking on all of the work, I think that it is responsible as a leader to say, you've taken on enough, someone else needs to help with this project. I think we need to schedule breaks for our employees and make sure that they're taking breaks and that they're going and their breaks are not work breaks. I think we need to keep reasonable hours. I think we need to be flexible. And I think we shouldn't spread our team too thin, right? So if we're spreading our team too thin, they're going to become overwhelmed. When they become overwhelmed, they become less productive. When they become less productive, it leads to attrition, and then the whole cycle just starts over again. And we as employers want to prevent attrition and overturn. And if we're going to prevent attrition and overturn, we have to do some of these things in order to help our employees. We have to provide them with adequate resources so they're not searching and they're not looking for resources to be able to do their job. And to provide those adequate resources without them asking us to do so. We need to equip our team with the proper tools. If they're running around and they have no computer, but yet we have an electronic health record, well, how can they do their job? And all we're doing is adding to their overwhelm and their stress. Create a supportive culture. Let them tell us. I mean, my clinical director will come into my office and she will say to me, Rachel, I'm over today. I've got to go. And I say, go. There's no reason for you to be here. The rest of us, we've got it. We've got it. You go, you take a break, you get yourself back and, come back tomorrow brighter. Play together. So have fun together. That's super important in any workplace. Here, once a month, sometimes twice a month in the summer, we all go out, we come in our jeans on a Friday and we all go out and we play with our clients. We've played softball, we've played volleyball, we've played kickball, and just a time to be fun and free together where there's no work involved and there's no pressure. And then give them a voice and it's not just enough. In my opinion, it's not just enough to just give them a voice, but then you have to hear them. So if you give them a voice, but you don't hear them, it doesn't matter. And if you give them a voice and you hear them, and then you do nothing with their reflection to you as a leader, then it doesn't matter either. So you've got to give them a voice, you have to hear them, and then you need to do something about whatever is happening with them. Be fair, and that's across the board, right? So I tell people all the time, I might have my favorites, but you're never going to know who you are because I treat everyone the same. And it doesn't matter if you're my most stellar employee. If you mess up, I'm going to call you on it. It seems too often that leaders and employers get into the sense of wanting to be friends. We're not friends. I work for you as your leader, you work for me as my employee, right? And there's expectations. And so with boundaries, professional boundaries, right, you can be fair. And then recognize success, cheer them from the rooftops, shout them from the mountaintops. When people are successful, they hit a goal, they knock it out of the park. It is super important to give people public, you praise in public, you criticize in private, right? So praise, praise, praise in a public forum. So this is the first thing that we talked about, which is success requires effort. Effort induces stress. Stress won't lead to burnout. So burn bright and not out. And that's the end. I do have, looks like 11 minutes. If anybody has any questions. Eric?
Hello, thank you for that wonderful presentation and great points. Let's see. Amy asked if you could go over the point D in D.R.A.G.O.N again.
Sure. So deloading your priorities, which is the number one thing in making sure that you're becoming a dragon. So that's looking at the joy of missing out, which is getting rid of anything that's in your calendar that is not necessary. So any meetings that you were considered optional, right? Getting them off your calendar. Any of those coffees or lunches with coworkers that you don't want to go to because they're just people that may complain all the time, or they're just talking about their kid for the 7th time that you've already heard. And so taking those all off your calendar and making sure that everything that's on your calendar is necessary. Being able to diminish, delete, or I can't think of the other D word right now, but diminish or delete anything that is not pertinent of you, right? So getting rid of all of the tasks that are not actually your job, focusing on what is your job, and pulling that in, right, to make sure that what you're doing in your job, you're actually doing well before you take on anything else. And so deleting those emails that don't belong to you, that don't pertain to you, and making sure that you're pulling everything back in. And I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thanks. And we do have a few questions about getting a copy of the presentation. So
sure.
Okay, if we're going to put that on our website.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a fantastic book, by the way, that if you want to learn more, you want to read more in depth of a lot of the things that I've talked about today. It's called the Burnout Gamble. And it is actually, it's referenced several times throughout my presentation, but it's by Hamza Khan. And that's K-H-A-N, and it's called the Burnout Gamble. And it is a fantastic book that probably saved my life, to be quite honest, because I could see myself being a residual burnout person.
I love to hear the personal stories. That makes it real. Thank you. The Burnout Gamble. Okay, and put that on the chat. Also, this is recorded, so please share it with your colleagues and your supervisors. That'll be on our website as well, and also on our Facebook page. Let's see, we do have another few questions. Okay, Marivelle said, how do you say no without sounding negative or uncooperative?
So I think this starts with, it also has to be, you also have to have a relationship with your boss, right? And so, your relationship with your boss is very important. Making sure that that relationship is supportive. And if it's not, honestly, you probably don't want to work for them. And so making sure that when you have a relationship that you can go into your boss and say, listen, my plate is really, really full. And the fact that you asked me this, right, makes me extremely overwhelmed. It's really not within my scope of what I'm supposed to be doing. It is in Jennifer or Susan's scope, right? And she appears to have some time. Could maybe she be assigned this task? You're not being an insubordinate now. But if you have a relationship with, and someone asked up above, like, how do I handle this with my employees? Well, I have a relationship with my employees that's supportive in nature. You know, my directors that are directly under me have absolutely no problem saying to me, hey, Rachel, like, I have this going on in my life. You know, I might have to check out at 4. Is that okay? My answer is always yes, right? Like, make sure either I'm in the loop or someone else in your staff is in the loop, and go, right? Because we do have a personal life and a professional life. Our job isn't, at the end of the day, right? When we die, what do we want them to say about us? Oh, they worked 100 hours a week and I never saw them, so therefore I don't know them. Or, you know, I want my daughter to be able to say, my mom was really great at her job, right? She helped all of these people throughout her career, but she was the best mom. And, you know, these are all the things that I did with my mom, right? Because at the end of the day, my family is going to be there for me. When the job is no more and I'm old and retired and, you know, I need somebody to take care of me, right? It's your family that's going to step in and do that. And so, creating a relationship with your boss where you have that ability to go in, like I said, it'd be very different if somebody walked into my office and said, hell no, Rachel, I'm not doing that. No. That is going to get a reaction out of me because I do have, right, like a tendency to be in the fight mode. It is going to be very different than if you're going to appeal to my human side and say, I'm extremely overwhelmed. I've got all of this on my plate. I'm really struggling with picking this up too. And it's not so much in my scope of what I do. And so that would be how I would encourage you to do that.
Awesome. And I have had a few questions on how we get the CEU certificate. For this, there's going to be an evaluation link that'll should automatically pop up on your computer if it works well, and fill out the evaluation on our website, and then you'll be able to print your certificate of completion. For some reason you missed that or it doesn't work, we will have a follow-up email go out tomorrow. You could click on the link there. And if for some reason the technology gets in the way, because I know there's a lot of security in place with companies, just email us. Darcel's information should be on there, and we'll be glad to send you the certificate. So let's see, Darcel, thank you so much for helping with the chat box and the Q&As. Did I miss any questions?
I do not believe so. The rest were compliments. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and it was a great presentation. Thank you, Rachel.
Well, thank you to all of you. And so baby steps when we're talking about this type of, you know, avoiding burnout. And so for the rest of the year, so what is that? The next 10 days, I highly encourage every single one of you to embrace the JOMO and also to step away from your phone, because it is like Pavlov's dog, right? Like where we constantly get pinged and we're checking our phone. Step away from the phone for at least an hour or two every single day, and you will feel so much better.
Well, thanks again, Rachel. And I think I'm going to go take a break. I don't know about y'all.
There you go.
Great job.
Yeah, me too.
So that concludes our presentation for today. Everybody have a great holiday. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.